the doctrine of parens patri. This is where our problems lie. Parens patri is Latin for parent of the nation, which is basically the state or the federal government. In law, it refers to the public policy power of the state to intervene against an abusive or negligent parent, legal guardian, informal caretaker, and to act as the parent of any child, individual, or animal who is in need of protection. Now, the precept of parens patri goes all the way back to Roman times. And basically, the concept comes from Rome, where the state controls basically every major facet of your life. Now, in Roman times, they had different classes of people. Some were outright slaves. Some had positions that many of us have right now. We're like in the middle, and then you have the rich who were considered free. So anything under the rich, the elite, were pretty much servants of the state. This insidious concept, even after Rome fell, was picked up by the Roman Catholic Church. And through their ecclesiastical law and Roman civil law is what they tried to subjugate the nations of the world. Now, England and some other countries rebelled against it. And even the settlers who came over here, set up shop for themselves, were well aware of the Roman Catholic Church and Roman civil law, and that's why they set up the Constitution and Bill of Rights in the way they did, where the people would not be subject to the state or a king or an emperor, but will be kings of themselves, and as a collective be the sovereign of their nation states. Precept upon precept, the Roman Catholic Church made attacks against the United States of America. Some was rebuffed, but they don't quit. And the culmination of their efforts happened on March 9th, 1933, and again when the New Deal was erected. That was all Vatican influence. And so after the slaughterhouse cases, the Supreme Court allowed in admiralty jurisdiction with the people. Admiralty jurisdiction is the law of the water. The United States Constitution was based on the law of the land and based on the Bible, the Holy Scriptures, King James Version 1611. And by the way, that Bible is still in effect because it pretty much molds and shaped what was going on in this country early on, although you had heretics that were part of the Constitution and Bill of Rights itself. But after the court allowed that in, that was pretty much the downfall of this country back then. Okay, so recently I was a participant in a private seminar that dealt with this issue of parens patri. It creates slaves out of everyone that is partaking in the benefits of the public charitable trust. And one of the biggest items out of the public charitable trust that most people identify with quickly is Social Security. And this is under admiralty maritime jurisdiction. That is the despised Roman civil law. Roman civil law makes slaves out of people by attaching persons to them, mainly by the birth certificate and the Social Security. Hence, people are looked upon as actors, not as living men and women, but as man or other animals. That one blew me away when I learned about that. On the federal and state sides, in many of the states, and definitely in the federal, that term, man or other animals, which means they equate man with animal. And under parens patri, people are basically looked upon from the Roman times all the way up to now as chattel, no different from a cow or pig, man or other animals, because there is something about man and this corporate trust corporation that it cannot recognize man. But if they can attach artificial legal persons and have you enjoinder with it, is how they look upon you as a surety, accommodating party, or trustee. And that's how they get dominion and control over the body. And this is the reason why we want to separate from that legal person that they created for us to do business in commerce, because in commerce, man cannot do business with a corporation. This is why they had to create, because of the bankruptcy, they had to create an entity for us to work through. Okay, this is something that the founding fathers wanted to keep out of this country. That is the king, Roman civil law, and admiralty jurisdiction. They knew well about it and the dangers that it presented. However, the Jesuits were and are very persistent, and precept upon precept, line upon line, they slowly infected this country with Roman civil law and its fruits, to the point that common law and the actual federal constitution are not even acknowledged in their courts. And rightfully so, if you understand why. And that's a whole nother discussion in itself. So I see that we have to come out of Babylon and be separate, which is to come out of the system, to divorce it, and to live through our own foreign express trust. And that is only to do business. Everything else will be private and outside of the scope of the United States and its franchises. That is the state of states. Otherwise, to commingle therein, you are in the belly of the beast. This subject we should be keenly aware of and react accordingly. You can be in the system or out. Most people are in the system, but don't know how. How to get off of the plantation. Status correction of the record. Most people who speak of status correction talk as if their personal status is being corrected. I don't see it that way. In my view, status correction is not about the man or woman. It is about updating the government's records regarding the birth certificate state and your office holder position. Key point there. Your office holder position. As you will see, the government does not recognize the man or woman, only legal fictions, which I will explain later. Furthermore, because of our interaction with the state, federal governments is based on contracts and trusts, and one does not want to be the surety or the accommodating party or the trustee. Accordingly, if the government's records are not corrected regarding the BC estate name and your office, the presumption is that you, the body, are the surety trustee responsible for the debt or claims, anything that's against that estate. So based on how I see things, the process is a status correction of the record because the status of the principal, the birth certificate estate, and the office holder, both are fictions and are at issue, not the living soul. Your status as a man or woman did not change in the government's eyes. Maybe in God's eyes, if you were born again of the water and the spirit. The only thing is changing is the record. It's not about the body. It's not about the man. It's about the records. Because these fiction organizations, government, corporations, these are creations of men. So how can a non-living entity have any sort of authority over the man? And all the records in questions were records that was produced under that banner. So if anything that's off is the records. And what we want to change is our position in the trust or in the contract to reflect that we are not the surety or the accommodating party or the trustee. That's crucial. That's huge. So once you achieve that and they recognize it, then that's when you're loosed. And based on my extensive time at law, in equity, common law, I haven't seen anything that can get it done so quick, so cheaply, and they recognize it. Because under the ANC, the assumed name certificate, the assumed business name is not you, and you're going to register that name as an unincorporated entity, not subject to the federal, maybe the state where it was at, and thereby establish yourself as the name holder. That's an office. Power of attorney, that's an office. Beneficiary, that's an office. So this whole process in this system is not about you. It's about the fictions. It's about the office holder, because that's all they can recognize. For those who may not know, this portion of the presentation is foundational and necessary for understanding who you are and who you are not. Now, some of you will know the difference between these names and what they mean. But if you don't know the difference, you're going to have a problem. Okay, so by the time we're done here, you should know what's the difference between those names. Now, keep in mind, this is a quick overview. I've done webinars or seminars in the past where I spent hours on some of these issues that we're dealing with here now. But the first issue is, like we talked about earlier, is that the person is all the system can recognize, whether it's artificial, natural, legal person. A person may be natural or artificial. Now, a lot of people take the term natural person to refer to a living human being. I do not go with that thought. And keep in mind, natural person, you can't find that in the Bible. As a matter of fact, there are scriptures that speaks about God has no respecter of persons. Because remember, persons were prevalent even during Christ's time. Okay, in legal land, a natural person can also be considered a legal person. So if you can be considered a legal person and a natural person, that can't be from God. That's a construct of man. And by the way, these terms come out from Black's Law 4th and Bouvier's Law Dictionary 1856. What is a human being in law? Well, in my search and other people's searches, it's not defined in any of the legal dictionaries. A legal person, a being, real or imaginary, created by law, which means created by man. And legal persons have civil rights, not unalienable rights or inalienable rights, and are vested in each natural person. Now, legal persons refer to a human or a non-human entity that is treated as a person. So if you're going to say a human is a man, although I don't even like to use the word human because it means a hue of a man, it's not a full man or a fully created man. But even if you say a human is living and then a non-entity and still be treated as a person. See, this is tricknology of words that you'll find in legal land over and over again. When a person is used in statute or other color of law, it is presumed, however, to also mean to apply to natural persons. But when the word person is spoken in legislative acts, natural persons will be intended unless something appears in the context to show that it applies to artificial persons, which most of them do. Now, if they do speak of man, and like I said, the only place where I saw the word man even used in statutory configurations and codes and rules and regulations were those that mentioned that phrase, man or other animal, over and over and over again. So they don't speak to the man that was created by God. They only speak of entities created by themselves. Now, the office of person, which is a huge office that everybody with a birth certificate has, and that person is controlled by the state, legislature, or Congress. Office of person. That birth certificate is the office of person that most people are enjoined with. So remember, they had to create an office in order for us to engage in commerce. Man cannot have intercourse with legal fictions and vice versa. Can't do it. It's called the rule of like kind. Man to man, fiction to fiction. Okay, legal fiction. A rule assuming as true something that is clearly false. That's basically the bedrock of the entire system. A rule assuming as true something that is clearly false. The whole legal system, legal land, is based on legal fictions. The 14th Amendment, which was the accelerant to where we're at now. All persons born or naturalized in the United States. Well, if United States is a corporate construct, as the Supreme Court of the United States said it many years ago, that all governments, because a lot of people looked at corporate United States that was created in 1871, which that's a myth also, because it started back in 1806. The Supreme Court said that all governments are corporate in nature. You can't touch government. You can't speak to government. You can only speak to their representatives. It's a fiction. So when they said all persons born or naturalized in the United States, they're talking about fiction. They're not talking about men and women. They can't. How can you be born into a fiction? And the United States has been clearly shown to be corporate in nature, although it emanated out of a trust. Because even though they create these fictions, they come from the original. That's why they cannot outright destroy the Constitution, because the authority in which Congress, the Senate, the President all act upon is based on the original. So if you take away the original, everything falls. So that's one of the reasons why it hasn't been outright struck down. And it's a reason why we still have something to stand on. Okay, here you see human beings is not defined in legal dictionary. They define person as a human being, man, and they had that in all caps. I think this one was out of Bouvier's. Mankind, feudal tenant, and 5, a member of a corporation. A human being, a person, is a feudal tenant. This is going back to medieval times, some of these definitions. In principle, we're under that right now. And I saw it through real estate. Ever read a deed? You'll see that you're not an owner. You're only a tenant, and a feudal tenant at that. Okay, a human being is a tenant to a feudal superior. The feudal superior that back then was the king and his appointed nobles. They were considered feudal superior. Well, what takes place now? I wish I could have found that chart, because there's a chart that I've seen where it did the breakdown, what was done in the old, and showed the corresponding new. And it went all the way down from king down to the slave, the peasant. And the feudal superior now is the state under parens patriae. See that? Now you see how those two interlock in what we're doing. So we have to take the true authority of order in this country, God, man, government, corporations, and put them back in their rightful order when we do our ANC and the way that I do it. The way I do it is different from anybody out there. I haven't seen my way done by anybody else. And I put those things in order at the filing. You can't do it after the fact. I'm an example of that. I wound up doing it for other people, but when I did it for myself, I couldn't do it because I came after the fact, and you have gatekeepers and they shut it down. Okay, so is a believer of God, of the Holy Scripture, a person? No. You can't find one scripture in any of the original language that equates a legal fiction to be man. The terms human being and natural persons are not found in the Holy Scriptures. The legalistic so-called law of man now prevailing in America and around the world does not recognize the law of God and does not recognize man is divine life unless the same is invoked. If you don't invoke it, they won't acknowledge it. And that's in various forms of law, by the way, also. Like when you're dealing with some of the UN charters that United States agreed to, those provisions are not automatically recognized unless invoked. Okay, I am not a person. I'm not a legal person, I'm not a legal fiction, I'm not a human being, but I am a man created by the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob of the Holy Scriptures. Now you hear I talk about the Holy Scriptures a lot, and I did not always integrate it into my work, maybe until the last 10 years. But I come to learn that it is actually acknowledged in this system as the supreme law. They acknowledge it. Congress acknowledged it. The Senate acknowledged it. A president acknowledged it. It is on the books. And I've known of people who actually litigate with the word. And generally, the judges get up and move out. Because once you bring to their attention, is he a greater judge than God? And if you already establish your law form to be based on the Holy Scriptures, is that law form subservient to your codes, rules, regulations, policies, and procedure? I think not. And that's one of the reasons why they run out of the courtroom. Okay, the name game. Nothing in commerce, no action, no contract, no trust. Nothing can start until there's an acknowledgement of a name. In Roman times, like we mentioned before, there were classifications of people. And you see that John Henry Doe in all capital letters? That's pretty much the slave. John H. Doe, some rights. John Henry, all caps Doe, even more rights. Should be one more there, where the person was considered a free man, and that's generally written out in all lowercase letters. Oh, there it is. It's right there. Yeah, John Henry Doe, total free man. Now, this is something that gets a lot of people in trouble because, especially in court situations, when they call out a name, John Henry Doe, and he stands up, a man stands up. He just acknowledged that he's accepting the liability that's attached to the name. You are not a name. A name, as you can see here, is a label, is a distinctive sign of a thing. You are not the name because, generally speaking, the name is on paper or on a computer screen, is not on you, and the name is not you. This is one of the reasons why I say one known as or one called Harold Ellis. I'm not acknowledging the liability, especially in their commerce. As soon as you acknowledge the name, generally speaking, the game is over. Everything else is, kangaroo court for show. That's pretty much self-explanatory about the difference between the all-cap name and the appellation. Appellations are attributed to men and women. Name is attributed to, in commerce, to things. It's a label, but that's a huge, huge issue. The language game. This is one of their tricks between words and language overall. It's getting out of hand. One of the ways the legal system tricks the people is to use the slick use of language, which is often not English under English grammar and syntax rule, as most people think it is, especially all uppercase words and sentences. Generally speaking, words in all uppercase, unless they are, just like we did here, put the dashes between the words, are not even words. But you can't find those words in the dictionary in all uppercase. So with regards to contracts, agreements, or trusts, without an agreement on language, there can be no contract. You must challenge language when it's presented to you. You question, what does this mean? What does this mean? And this goes to the famous 18 U.S.C. 1342 regarding mail. And I use this often. If you get mail that's not in your proper name or your Christian name, it's not for you. And according to their rules, you're not supposed to keep any mail that's not yours. Okay. And now you're dealing with status, standing, and jurisdiction. You're always a man or a woman, not a person, not a human being, not a natural person. The nationality that you're seeking is a state national and American, and not the statutory national. There's a difference. Your jurisdiction as a man relative to the government and the courts. The 1791 Constitution for the United States of America. Notice I got that lowercase. Depending on how it's used in the sentence, you're talking about the United States, meaning the nation states being united together. The common law and exclusive equity, and some people also claim the Holy Scriptures as the first jurisdiction and the foremost authority, as we already just spoke. And this is the one that we have to keep in mind most of the time, because we're dealing in their commerce. So you're just an agent in their commerce. You're not dealing personally. You're dealing by and through the person. So your jurisdiction as an agent of the person in United States statutory acts and codes, you are a office holder. That's the mask that you're wearing, is the office holder. So the office holder and the other side are both fictions. You're the actor for the office holder that's on behalf of the principal. Know your position and assume the same throughout a transaction. You can't go back and forth. Now, this is just brief because this can go much, much deeper. Okay, the government, the corporate world looks upon you as a person. The government, corporate actors make the presumption that you are acting in the role of a legal person, which is a creation of government, which is why they are seeking contract performance of the debtor, that is, the legal person. This is why they always need the name. Remember, I said nothing can start without the name. Nothing. A court case can't start without the acknowledgement of the name. I've known cases that couldn't go past that. Okay, you need the name of the person to establish joinder with you as the surety accommodating party, especially if you do not rebut the presumption. So that's the presumption. You walk in, they're looking at you as a corporate person. They need a person, since there is no way the corporate person can contract directly with a living man or woman under the rule of like kind. They need a man or woman to consent. Everything in this country right now is generally by consent. You volunteered in by contract, agreement, or trust, knowingly or unknowingly. And that's why they come after the body. And this is another reason that we need to get this in, especially for those that don't have their setup that separated them from the estate. Because legally speaking, because we signed on and gave them jurisdiction over the body, because you're in joinder, they can literally do what they want with you. Legally speaking, it's not lawful, but legal. Most things that are legal are not lawful. They need a man or a woman to consent to take responsibility of the liability in the matter of the person, whether unknowingly or knowingly, which is called joinder. Under common law jurisdiction, both parties must enter into a contract knowingly, voluntarily, and intentionally, otherwise the contract is void. Under statutory jurisdiction, which is basically admiralty jurisdiction, the jurisdiction of the water, consent to a contract can be presumed by silent acquiescence unless the party contracted thereby rebuts the presumption of consent. And that's another devious thing that they operate under Roman civil law, presumptions. And most of the presumptions are adverse to you or your person. That is evil, what they do. So if you don't rebut presumptions, it's deemed true whether it is or not. If you do not wish to consent to their contract offer, you must rebut the presumption that you're acting in the role of a fictional legal person. You're never obligated to answer questions or provide government-issued ID. Truly, to uphold your government of the people, it is not your duty to answer questions. It is your duty to ask questions. Remember, they're supposed to be working for you. You're supposed to be the boss, they the employee. You're the beneficiary, they're supposed to be the trustee. You have the right to know who is making a claim against you, the right to know who the injured party is, the right to accept or conditionally accept any claim against your person, not you, upon verification, the right to reserve your rights without prejudice, and thereafter the right to remain silent to avoid self-incrimination. Unfortunately, too many people talk too much with authorities and sink their own boat. Okay, private, to be in the private is to live in a private capacity as a living man or woman All men and women are created, not by man, gifted with unalienable or inalienable rights, responsibility, and credit. As 11 men and women, they are the creditors with the right to contract is unlimited, and they have unlimited liability. Living men and women are outside and above the state. Why? Because they created the state. The state cannot be over them unless they agree to allow that to happen. Unfortunately, many of us have done that, but this is a way to change that. And it's just an initial step before you can get completely on the private side, but it's an immediate divorce from the all-cap estate based on what you put on that paper or, type online, because you do this online, at least parts of it. Public, to be in the public, is to act in a public capacity as an accommodating party or surety and joiner to fictitious legal persons created by and governed by the state or Congress. That's their jurisdiction, is over persons. They created the birth certificate. That's not yours. That name is not yours. They just allow you to use it so you can have concourse in commercial activity. All men and women who act in legal fiction roles for the state are granted conditional privileges and benefits as prescribed in legislative acts. Not rights, privileges and benefits that can be revoked generally at any time. Big difference between privileges and benefits versus rights. Legal persons are inherently debtors. When they were created, they were in debt. They were a debtor because of the bankruptcy. And their right to contract is limited, and they have limited liability. Legal persons are inside and under the state. So you definitely don't want to be in that position and join or with this fiction, because that puts you at a disadvantage. The assumed name certificate from the state of Minnesota, relief from bondage. In many corporate proceedings, in and out of court, the party's corporate existence is presumed. We mentioned that earlier. When you walk in the door, they look at you as if you're of corporate character. And there's case law on that too. And unless one dispels the myth that they are a corporate legal person or surety for a corporate legal person in question. So naturally, you do not want this deadly presumption used against you. As you know, corporations are legal fictions. They do not exist except in people's minds. A corporation, which is a legal fiction, is considered in law a legal person, cannot think, talk, or act in any way. And for this reason, the corporation must have someone to speak and act for it. It's their representative of that corporation. The name you see in court documents, driver's license, utility bills, bank statements, birth certificates, social security cards, and other corporate documents, the names are often in all capital letters. And there's a reason for that. Most people assume that it is their name and that the document is addressing them. Not true. Do you know that the name in all capital letters, which appears to be your name, is not you or your name? Moreover, did you know that the corporate system, including courts, will deem you to be the all capital letter name, all cap name, unless you separate yourself from that all cap estate? The name is the estate. When you go to court, you want proof at the outset that you're not the legal person, the all cap name, and that you're not the surety or trustee. Because if this lie is not refuted, it will be presumed that you are responsible for the debt as surety or trustee. And that's key about making the status known of the principal and the office holder known at the outset. And there's many stories. Once they put the ANC into the record, the cases wind up disappearing because the man or woman or the office holder is not responsible for a creation that he or she did not create. However, you do not want this deadly presumption used against you. So how does someone separate oneself from the legal person? That is the all cap name. Douglas Joseph, who I've communicated with, we communicated and we disagreed about quite a few things, popularized the assumed name certificate from Minnesota. He does not claim to be the originator of the process. However, there is little doubt that he made it popular. Douglas Joseph also personally experimented on himself to make sure the process worked. So I give Douglas Joseph all the credit for bringing the process to our attention. However, I included an important extra step in the process that will help to establish the status of the legal person, the office holder, and the man and woman with the state and the feds. A straightforward approach that quickly separates the real man from the 14th Amendment citizen, a corporate legal fiction. The Douglas Joseph approach, using the assumed name certificate from Minnesota specifically, and the reason why we use Minnesota because all other states that I've researched, and according to Douglas Joseph, all that he searched, Minnesota is the only state that allows you not to be the owner of the name. Most other states tie you in as the owner of the name or of the assumed name. And we're not the owner of the name. We're just a name holder. But we're not the owner because we didn't create it. The state created it. So that is one of the reasons why we use Minnesota, and then apply the full faith and credit of the Constitution, so it applies in any other state of their union, the corporate union, just like you would do a birth certificate or driver's license. It's acknowledged around the country. It is a significant first step towards your commercial control of the legal person, and use it as the legal person was intended. Because in actuality, everybody that's using the birth certificate name without registration has no legal standing in court. All the states require, if you're going to do business, whether it be corporate as a trustee or even as a sole proprietor, you have to register. And once you register, you're allowed to do business. So a lot of people are doing business illegally, violating their legal statutes and codes. Based on my legal experience, it is the quickest, most cost-effective way I know to do the necessary separation, and here's the key, and have their system to recognize the divorce. Now, like I said, I've been in this game about 30-some years, 34. I've seen a lot of processes over the years. Many of them were beautiful, but they weren't recognized by either government. And there's a reason for that, because in most cases, remember I told you, man to man, fiction to fiction, most of those process was doing law of the land and tried to operate in the water. No, it won't work. That was a huge downfall of many for many years. They were mixing jurisdictions, which means it's an automatic cancellation. But they won't answer me. They won't do that. They don't have to. You canceled yourself. So we can do this without patriot methodology. That, patriot methodology is like a curse word. Okay, here is some information freely given on the subject regarding Douglas Joseph approach. There's a link there to a video. I don't know if it's still up or not, but the materials in the pCloud link are his materials. So I readily encourage people to look at it, especially if you want to save money. Okay, now my approach. My approach comes with a personalized living testimony in the form of a verified declaration. But why didn't you use an affidavit? Well, an affidavit is supposed to be straight facts, nothing else. No opinion, no assumptions. But when you do a verified declaration, which almost has the force and effect of an affidavit, you have that latitude to give an opinion or come to a conclusion of a matter, which in this verified declaration is a mini declaration of status. And it's filed together with the ANC documents, which will make the verified declaration a publicly recorded document. The verified declaration is personally adapted to fit your needs, your beliefs regarding your name, political status, and standing as a living soul, which is not the same as the all-cap corporate legal person. Now, the critical differences in approach, and me and Douglas Joseph went back and forth on this. The critical distinctions between Douglas Joseph's approach and my approach are stark. I considered it necessary to incorporate the verified declaration or equivalent. It doesn't have to always be a verified declaration. You can use an affidavit if you want to, with the ANC initially uploaded together. Like I mentioned earlier, it has to be done together or you won't be able to get it in. For the following reasons. Please be mindful that a name holder of the assumed business name does not necessarily have to be a man or a woman, but another fictional entity. And this point I discussed at length with Douglas Joseph, but he wasn't having it. With the verified declaration as part of the ANC filing, there will be no mistake who is the name holder of the assumed business name. That is you, a living man or woman. Further, and equally important, the following critical facts in the verified declaration are established in the public record. Your given name or the given name or Christian name you are called by, your jurisdiction and standing, depending on your core beliefs, your status and allegiance. All of this is critical, especially when we incorporate this with the passport application, because this is sort of like a package. You get the ANC done, then you go federal with the passport and you incorporate the ANC. Now you got state and federal recognition of the status of your person, and on the federal side, how they look upon you as a man or woman, and they treat you totally different as a result. Where the assumed business name came from, this is huge if you connect the name to the birth certificate. Now, keep in mind, the ANC does not necessarily have to be attached to the BC. There are some people who actually gave up the BC, gave up the Social Security, squashed all these contracts that tie them into the system, and use an assumed business name that they created themselves for themselves and do business through that, almost like you would do a trust. So it can be done both ways. So depending on where a person, most people still want to have the Social Security. Some people want to still have the driver's license and all of that. So they keep that, but you still can separate yourself. And in their record, the division between the name holder and the principal cannot be one and the same, legally or lawfully. So that's where it's immediate. And if nobody objects in 90 days, that's considered a legal fact. Okay, the birth certificate name, that the all-cap name under the bankruptcy of 1933, a significant dispositive fact. The name holder of the assumed business name is alive and not fictional, not a fictional legal person. And lastly, who is responsible for the all-cap name if you use the birth certificate in connection with the all-cap name? That the state of state is the creator of the name and is liable for its creation and liabilities. All these and other elements are not part of Douglas Joseph's approach. I believe these elements and facts to be critical when dealing with corporate commerce. The corporate world has no jurisdiction over the living man or woman without consent, which we went over already. And the consent comes into play whether known or unknown by some contract, agreement, or trust. There is no other way that a corporate fiction or government can have authority over you unless you agree to it. Most of the time we agree without even knowing. Even when I was in the law, I didn't know that. I didn't know that until probably around 2012, 14. So a long time I went without knowing that when we sign these government forms, these are forms of contract or agreements that we voluntarily put our signature to. It's just like the people that take the jab. They sign on for that. They agree that no liability will be attached to the manufacturers or any of the agents in between before it gets into your arm. And being that we operate daily in commerce, what they tell you in transactions, buyer beware. Likewise, what is created by man, for example, a legal person, a corporation, etc., have no authority over man or woman without a contract, agreement, or trust. And when we talk about trust, we're talking about public trust, not private trust. Simply put, man's creation has no jurisdiction over man, the creator. This is a core point to understand in these essential matters. Now, the affidavit of corporate denial. For now, I also include an affidavit of corporate denial to further dispel the myth that you're a corporate legal person or surety for the all-cap corporate legal person. Now, that may change. I may incorporate that into the verified declaration in the future. But this is necessary because the alleged corporate status of any man or woman entering in the court, whether on paper or in the courtroom, because you can appear on paper, you don't have to appear in person, is automatically assumed by the judge unless the man or woman has given notice to counter the presumption. The affidavit of corporate denial rebuts that presumption. So when you're dealing with them in any form or fashion, they automatically presume that you're corporate in character, and it's your job to dispel. On the record, the ANC power of attorney. This is a clinchpin document. There are many people out there that are running around without the power of attorney. I'm dealing with somebody with that right now. They have the ANC, but they never did the power of attorney. Without the power of attorney, you won't show anybody you have capacity to act. Regarding the ANC, the power of attorney document is all important since it will demonstrate your capacity in commerce regarding the all-cap name. That is the assumed business name, the principal. Both Douglas Joseph and I use the POA. Some people do not and may run into trouble without it. In the system, nothing is about you, the living soul. You are not at issue unless you want to be surety or trustee. However, your capacity as an office holder is at issue. You need capacity to operate in their system. The proof of capacity regarding the assumed business name is the power of attorney. The attorney, in fact, acts on behalf of the principal, the assumed business name, and not on behalf of self. And some people have a hard time twisting it around their heads because many of us are so accustomed to coming from a personal vantage point and oftentimes coming from behind in defense that it's hard to go on the offensive or to acknowledge that you are not at issue. It's all about the names and the entities and the fictions that they created. Now you have, through the assumed business name, the capacity to sue, to be sued, to hold, purchase, to dispose of property, to contract and do banking when you're acting as an attorney in fact for the principal, the registered assumed business name, which is the assumed name certificate. The assumed business name needs a certificate of existence, another important document, and people should not skim around that, just try to save some money. You need a certificate of existence from the Minnesota Secretary of State's office to establish that the assumed business name ANC exists and is considered legally live. The certificate of existence, a separate document, is purchased with the ANC package. If the all-cap name is not live, it is considered dead and has no capacity to operate in commerce. Accordingly, it is essential to register the assumed business name you use in their system. Otherwise, the system does not have to recognize the assumed business name, especially in court, and the all-cap name would not have legal standing. So the power of attorney and certificate of existence in the package is essential. Keys of the power of attorney, and this is important. The attorney, in fact, is not liable for the principal's obligation and has no ownership rights in the principal's property. I hope people got that, because if that sentence is true, we don't own nothing, not commercially. And actually we don't, but that's another long story. But the bottom line, we don't own anything. And that's by their statutes and codes and also by God's law. The attorney in fact is not a surety or a trustee. The attorney in fact is protected like a trustee and likewise does have obligations to the principal via private contract, which is in effect fraudulent, but that's the way they operate because the principal can never agree. It's not alive. I had a hard time with that for a long time to even do the power of attorney because I saw that as dichotomous. It was an inherent dichotomy. How can the principal agree to contract? But that's what happens in fantasy land and how they get things done. No one can come in and force the attorney in fact to do or not to do anything in accordance to the POA agreement, power of attorney agreement. Courts generally cannot legally touch the attorney in fact when you are operating in that capacity and you're doing the right thing. Doing the wrong thing, you can get in trouble. Only the principal, which is fictional, can bring the attorney in fact into court for breach of duty, which that will never happen. In their system, once the assumed business name, the principal, is registered, it exists and is alive and has capacity to create contracts such as the power of attorney and have standing in court. Hence, the first contract, your entity, by the way, it is not the state's property. It is the unincorporated, and it is an unincorporated, will create using its registered name, is the durable power of attorney document. The power of attorney is a legal document binding on all parties. Therefore, it is crucial to understand everything in the power of attorney. Accordingly, if you use a live, registered, assumed business name, you, as the attorney in fact, can operate in commerce, and the corporate actors can hear and see the attorney in fact's office. Again, they can't recognize the man, but they can recognize the office and the principal. All right, once the ANC is complete and recorded, one would request authenticated copies of the ANC package, publish the ANC in according to statutory requirements. Some people skimp on that because they can, depending on where you're at. I know one state I did, it was like under $100, but it can easily go around $300. And some people don't want to pay that. But I think it's worth its weight in gold when you do the passport application because you're showing Department of State that this not only been filed, but it's been published. So you got two witnesses. You got the state and you got the publication to show that this entity is in existence. And record the power of attorney in the county record. And when you do that, the power of attorney in most jurisdictions allow for recording powers of attorney. And then we would add as exhibits the ANC, the affidavit of corporate denial, and you get it all in as one filing. And so now you have a complete record that can be used to get the state national recognition from the United States Department of State to acquire a state national passport. This way, you will have state and federal recognition of the status of the principal, the office holder, and the man and woman. Primary reason for the ANC and the passport with an explanatory statement is for the state and federal government's recognition that the all-cap name is not you and you are not surety for it. This fact is a huge deal, especially in the times we are living in right now. The federal and state governments only recognize legal persons, not living men and women. Keep in mind, that which was created cannot have jurisdiction over the creator. I keep repeating that. That needs to be in people's minds because we often think the opposite. Even some of us learn it. We talk as if they actually do have unadulterated power over us. And it's simply not true, especially after you break the contracts, return their goods, and live life the way God intended. So there is a way to escape even at this early stage. Because for some people, this will be early in the game before you catch up to speed dealing with trust and things of that nature, so you can really be totally separated, especially if you choose to return everything back. Or some people are comfortable just operating just like this, just with the ANC and the passport, and they do their business as an office holder, and they're almost operating it like a trust. It's similar too. You know, we can be in the world just long as we're not of the world. Once knowledgeable, now responsible. It's been on my heart to bring people to this so they can disengage, and especially what we're dealing with now, because right now, if they were to come to me and say, well, we want to see Harold Ellis Beale Jr., oh, can I see what you got on your paper there? Oh, okay, 1 second. And I'll come back with a birth certificate. This is who you're seeking. You can give him the vaccination because that's not me. And on your paper, that does not reflect me. And what can they do? Unless they're just going to just body slam you and just put it in your arm. But until it gets to that point, we have some way to prevent them from going forward. Now, I've gotten reports from California, of all states, because California is straight communist out there, and that has held them off. Okay, just keep in mind that that which was created cannot have jurisdiction over the creator unless they consent it. People created governments. Governments do not have an inherent authority or jurisdiction over people without a valid contract, agreement, or trust. You have to sign on to be subjugated. Unfortunately, most of us have done that. We have committed ourselves to servitude to a fictional government. The approach we are presenting to you is a way. It's not the only way to take back your authority and put the government in its place. Unlike so many approaches I have reviewed, this way is acknowledged by the state and federal governments. And that's huge. Because like I said before, many that I reviewed before, they weren't accepted. They were returned. And one of the reasons why they were crossing jurisdictions. This process, however, is only a stopgap approach until one learns more about trust, private foreign trust. And once you can operate a trust effectively, you can transfer what you have in the ANC into the trust over which the state nor federal governments will have inherent jurisdiction. And that is the goal, to get the private foreign trust. But in the meantime, you want to separate yourself immediately from the all-cap estate. So when it comes down to forced vaccinations, issues dealing with travel, etc., the governmental agencies will not have jurisdiction over your body. They will have jurisdiction over the legal person, their creations, but not you. And that is the goal of this process as I have presented. Anyone seeking to live on the private side of life who is currently in joinder with an all-cap name, this approach, the ANC and passport combo, is a do now first step that will assist in the status correction of the record process. This is not the final step to be on the private side of life. This is a step that has powerful implications for stopping adverse corporations, including courts, which are for-profit corporations, in their tracks. This first step will significantly help the newbie stop the real man, woman's mischaracterization by the corporate world until the newbie can learn the ropes of the private side of life, which will take some time to learn. So if you want to use our service or want more detailed information of the process, you must email my assistant, Jasmine Elizabeth, to set up an appointment. Status correction of the record. So we're talking about the assumed name certificate with verified declaration, only in Minnesota. Living testimony in form of an affidavit of corporate denial. Passport application with explanatory statement for state, national, or American status. You see some people use American national, but you can't find that in the legal books. Establishing your status on the public record. Notice to man agency. Notice to the world. Notice in public record. For example, the courthouse or the county recorder's office. I get this question often about expatriation. That's not needed with this process. And if you do want to do it, only after informed and educated educated choice. But what is being expatriated? The fiction. Well, you basically got control of the fiction, so you can control it the way it was designed to be controlled by the name holder. As you know, I'm a service provider. My group, Non-Group Network, PMA, Anybody interested for additional information or the like, you can contact my assistant, and hopefully after my webinar for the assumed name, the full-fledged webinar, I can focus on the mandates because I got docs dealing with that already. And I think that concludes it, Rob.
The post clips that follow have been added to the video for your edification to present more information on the State National Passport and the ANC Passport workshops. The donation terms to participate in the workshops are provided in the accompanying video link. The passport application for state national status. In the video you just saw, we did not go into detail about the passport application. In this add-on clip, we will dive into some of the points about the passport application and why it is needed for the status correction of the record on the federal side. Most of our attention was focused on the assumed name certificate, or the assumed business name, which is the foundation of our approach. For most Americans, securing a passport is typical, routine. You submit a DS-11 passport application form with identity documents, a photograph, and the required fees. However, most people are unaware that the all-cap name on the passport is not the man or woman, but the 14th Amendment U.S. citizen, which is a legal person, and with the living soul as the voluntary surety for the all-cap name estate. This is not a situation that we want. A side note regarding the passport itself. The name on the passport will be in all caps or all uppercase letters. However, it is the underlying record, that is, the passport application properly filled out, the explanatory statement, and the exhibits that go with that. That's what counts. And this is the record that we will be producing. Keep in mind, without this underlying record, the presumptions that you will be the all-cap name, or you are the all-cap name, or you are of corporate character will be presumed. Therefore, the underlying record is vitally important to rebut the already in place adverse presumptions. The foremost reason for the ANC and the passport with the explanatory statement is for state and federal government's recognition that the all-cap name is not you, and you are not surety for the all-cap name. The federal record must be corrected to rebut the many adverse presumptions that are in place before you sign the application. Let me hop back to identity documents. The identity documents do not identify people, but rather the all-cap name estate, the BC, the social security account, etc. This process that people go through for the passport is not about the living man or woman, but the legal person and the office holder that you use in their public commerce. The state and federal governments only recognize the legal person or the office holder, not the living. Remember, that which was created cannot have jurisdiction over the creator. I cannot emphasize this enough, because if you can get a hold onto this precept, your eyes will be forever open to the ruse that the elite is using against the people. The people created governments here in the United States of America. Governments do not have inherent authority over the people without consent by a valid contract, agreement, or trust. As stated before, most of us have, unfortunately and most times unknowingly, signed on to be subjugated, to be conquered, to be dominated, to be ruled over, to be under enemy control. That's what we signed up for without even knowing. We have willingly committed ourselves to servitude or slavery to a fictional government through the constant brainwashing from childhood until adulthood that the government has rule over us, which it doesn't unless we give it authority. The federal record must be corrected to remove us from the roles of slavery. Unlike many methods we have reviewed, the state and federal governments acknowledge the approach we are presenting. The status correction of the record is recognized on the federal side through the passport application with the very important explanatory statement. The explanatory statement contains the information that gives notice to the federal government that you are not it. You are not the all-cap name estate. To correct the record regarding the all-cap name estate and you on the federal side, these are some of the essential points that are addressed in the passport application, more particularly in the explanatory statement, to show that 1. A U.S. citizen is a citizen of a municipal corporation trust called the United States, which is not a citizen, you notice a capital C, of a union state of the United States of America. So United States citizen and the citizen of the United States or of a union state of the United States of America are two different entities. It's one of the tricks they play to suck us into their lie. The statutory U.S. citizen is a legal fiction of the United States municipal corporation / trust and has no rights secured by the Constitution for the United States of America. So the U.S. citizen is a legal fiction, a creation of Congress. Only living men and women have rights and protections secured by the Constitution for the United States of America. Notice I said Constitution for rather than Constitution of. Two different constitutions. Remember, we did mention in the main video that the Supreme Court recognized at least 3 constitutions or 3 United States. Okay, 4, one can seek the safer designation as a state national per Article 3 of the 11th Amendment and the 11th Amendment of the Constitution for the United States of America. Keep in mind, that Constitution is still on the books, never been repealed. It might be looked over, but it's there, which is the same as a citizen of the United States as noted in Articles 1 and 3 of the same Constitution. And you'll notice that when you look that up, that the citizen of the United States is capital C as opposed to U.S. citizen being with a small c. Two different entities or two different persons, because it's still a person even under the United States of America. A state national is also a citizen of the United States, and that's the citizen of the United States under the organic Constitution for the United States of America. These are the clarifications that are being made in the explanatory statement to show that you're not in their jurisdiction and that you're not a corporate person because you're relying on the law of the land as opposed to the law of the sea. 6. But a citizen of the United States is not the same as a 14th Amendment citizen of the United States. Notice the capital C and the small c. And that language is noted in the organic and in the de facto constitutions. 7. A 14th Amendment citizen, a creation of Congress, is born in the United States, a federal territory, and subject to Congress. The 14th Amendment citizen is not the same as the state citizen born in one of the several states of the Union. The United States of America is the de jure lawful republic government, not the United States, which is de facto legal but not lawfully sanctioned government. This is utterly important to know and to be able to express to the governments, whether it be state or federal, that you understand this and that you're not subjugating yourself to this false power, the United States, that is controlled by Congress, that was created by Congress, but not under the original or organic Constitution of the United States. The ANC Passport Workshops. In Harold Ellis's extensive experience of working with people, he has learned that most people are without the necessary underlying knowledge regarding the issues like parens patriae, the legal person, the all-cap name, among other important related legal issues briefly discussed in the video. These issues are essential to comprehend why we need to separate our bodies from the all-cap name estate and to be able to effectively stand on the square with understanding when explaining the ANC or the state national passport to others. You need to know what you're getting into and understand the same. It is not good to rely on paperwork and not understand what is happening because most of us will be tested, especially in court. However, if you do the right things in the beginning of proceedings, oftentimes you don't need to go to court, which is happening for me in like the last 3 or 4 cases. They're disposed of without even appearing. This endeavor will be a new way of life for those who choose to take their bodies out of commerce as surety or the trustee. To address this critical issue of lack of knowledge, Harold Ellis has started the ANC Passport Workshops to provide the participants with the necessary educational information and provide Zoom workshop sessions to address any concerns about the material. Harold Ellis wants people to understand what they're getting into, not go through the motions relying on paperwork they don't comprehend. Harold Ellis will no longer share documents with recipients without comprehension first. It can be very dangerous to just rely on documents not understanding, and it has gotten a lot of people in hot water over the years. Also, it's really necessary that you understand what is going on. Every document you sign, every contract you sign, any other agreement, you should understand what is being stated therein. And if you don't know, go to someone that can help you break down what is being said, because as noted in the video, there's two different languages going on. Legalese and standard English are not the same. Yeah, it's important to understand what's going on, and especially if you want to share with others. A perfect example of this, which has started me on this road for people to be accountable for the documents they sign, was a lady that I worked with in a foreclosure action. We were successful. It was a long, drawn-out process, and we prevailed. Her friends started to ask her, what happened? How did this happen? She could not explain one thing, because I essentially was doing everything from cradle to grave, and she was just a beneficiary of my efforts, but she did not understand what was going on. So from that point forward, it has been my policy to involve the client as much as possible in the process, so they understand what's going on, they understand the effort that's going in, and so that they can be able to stand when questioned. And with regards to the ANC and the state national passport, a lot of people do these processes, separately, although I have it in a combined package for those that want it, and don't understand what is going on. I don't want that to happen here. So this is one of the reasons we started a workshop. We want to give the education first before we get into the documents. Okay, to be effective with time, Harold Ellis conducts the ANC passport workshops in a private group setting. This approach has been proven to be an effective form of learning for all concerned. The workshops will be limited to 7 men and women per workshop to ensure understanding is acquired and that no one gets left behind. The bottom line, anything done in the present Babylon system is based on a fictional premise. Communications with government, corporations, trusts, LLCs, and the like is not about the living soul, but the legal person that was assigned to you a little after your appearance on this earth. So when you do business with or receive anything from the government, corporations, trusts, LLCs, and the like, without the status correction of the record, you will be on the hook for the principal, that is the all cap name estate, since you are presumed to be of corporate character in joinder with the all cap name estate, and therefore responsible for the debt as surety, trustee, or the accommodation party for the principal. This has to stop, because the state and federal governments have control of the all cap name estate with you stuck to it. Accordingly, it is in your best interest to divorce the all cap name estate as surety, trustee, or accommodation party for the principal and operate in commerce at arm's length to the principal. That is, no more joinder. It is time to take your body out of commerce so that the state and federal governments will no longer have jurisdiction over the body to mandate vaccines or tell you you need a driver's license, etc.